He never noticed her. Until the black woman saved his mother's life. A love story. Veronica has been in love with her boss for exactly 1,095 days. Not that she was counting. Paul George was brilliant with business and completely blind to her. 3 years of coffee deliveries, schedule management, and silent longing. Then his mother's hand went to her chest at a dinner party, and Veronica stopped being the invisible assistant. She became the hero. And heroes? They're impossible to ignore. This is the story of how crisis became love. Close your eyes for just a moment. Think about the last time a story made you feel something real. Made your heart race. Made tears fall without permission. Made you remember why being human is so beautifully complicated. That's what we do here at CJ Stories. Whether you're returning or just discovering us, welcome home. This is your safe space for tears, laughter, hope, and everything in between. Today's story will take you somewhere unexpected. It'll make you think. It'll make you feel. And I promise you, you won't see the ending coming. But here's the thing, the magic only works if you stay till the very end. No skipping. No rushing. Just you, me, and a story that might just change how you see the world. If it moves you, let me know you're here, subscribe, like, and share this with someone whose heart needs touching today. Ready? Let's step into today's story. The elevator doors slid open on the 42nd floor of the Pemberton Financial Tower in downtown Seattle, and Veronica James stepped out carrying 2 caramel macchiatos and a stack of quarterly reports that threatened to slide from her grip at any moment. It was Tuesday, June 11, 2024. She was 34 years old, and she'd been invisible for approximately 6 years, 2 months, and 17 days. Not literally, of course. But to Paul George, the man whose coffee she'd been delivering every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 years, she might as well have been a ghost. The view from this floor never got old. Elliott Bay stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the morning sun turning the water into liquid silver. Mount Rainier stood proud in the distance, snow-capped even in June. Veronica paused for just a moment, letting herself breathe it in before the day swallowed her whole. "Morning, Veronica." Janet from accounting smiled as she passed, her silver hair perfectly styled as always. "Morning, Janet. Love that blouse on you." "Oh, this old thing?" Janet beamed anyway, touching the silk collar. "You're sweet." Veronica continued down the hallway, her heels quiet on the plush carpet. The offices up here were all glass and chrome, modern and cold in a way that probably cost more money than she'd see in a lifetime. She'd worked at Pemberton Financial for 8 years now, starting as a receptionist fresh out of business school, working her way up to executive assistant. It wasn't where she'd imagined she'd be at 34, but it paid well enough to support her mother and keep a decent apartment in Capitol Hill. Paul George's office sat at the corner, commanding views of both the bay and the city. Senior Vice President of Acquisitions. 36 years old, born in 1988, though you'd never know it from the way he carried himself with the confidence of someone much older. He joined Pemberton 5 years ago after selling his first company for an amount of money that had made the Seattle Times business section. Now he was worth somewhere in the range of $400 million, if the office gossip was accurate. Probably more. She knocked twice on the doorframe, even though the door was open. He didn't look up from his laptop. He never did. "Coffee's here," she said, setting the cup on the mahogany desk, away from the papers scattered across its surface. "The quarterly reports you wanted. And your mother called. She said to remind you about dinner on Sunday." "Thanks." The word came automatic, his eyes still fixed on the screen. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. He probably had been. When Paul George focused on something, the rest of the world ceased to exist. Veronica had learned not to take it personally somewhere around year 2. She turned to leave, then paused. "Paul? Your mother called 3 times. She sounded worried." That got a flicker of attention. His gray eyes lifted briefly, met hers for maybe half a second. "I'll call her back. She specifically said you've been saying that for 2 weeks. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Are you managing my mother now, too?" "Just passing along the message. But if I were managing her, I'd probably be more effective at getting you to call." This time he did smile, small but genuine, before returning to his screen. "Noted." Veronica left, closing the door behind her with a soft click. In the hallway, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. 3 years of delivering coffee, managing schedules, screening calls, and organizing a life that never seemed to slow down. 3 years of watching him date women who looked like they'd stepped out of magazine spreads. 3 years of being professionally invisible. It was fine. It was her job. And she was good at her job. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Baby, can you pick up Dad's prescription on your way home? Running low." Veronica typed back quickly. Already ordered it, Ma. They'll deliver by 6. What would I do without you? Probably the same thing you did for 34 years before I got competent. You were always competent. Love you. Love you too, Ma. She slipped the phone back into her blazer pocket and headed to her own desk, a neat workspace just outside Paul's office. Her computer screen showed 18 new emails, a calendar packed with back-to-back meetings, and a reminder that Paul's dry cleaning needed to be picked up by 3. The morning passed in its usual rhythm. Phone calls, emails, scheduling conflicts that needed diplomatic resolution. At 11, Paul emerged from his office looking distracted. I need to push the 2 o'clock with Henderson. Veronica was already pulling up the calendar. Wednesday at 10 work? He's got an opening. Perfect. And can you? Dry cleaning will be ready by 3. Dinner reservation at Canlis for Friday is confirmed, 7:30. And I ordered new business cards since you're almost out. He blinked. I didn't ask you to check the business cards. You were down to your last box. Seemed logical. Something crossed his face then, an expression she couldn't quite read. It lasted maybe 2 seconds before the usual composed mask returned. Thank you, Veronica. Just doing my job. He nodded and retreated back into his office. Through the glass wall, she watched him settle behind his desk, phone already pressed to his ear. Paul George was always moving, always thinking 3 steps ahead, always building something bigger. It was part of what made him successful. It was also probably why he'd been through 4 relationships in the time she'd worked for him, none lasting longer than 6 months. Not that she kept track. Except she totally kept track, because knowing his personal life was part of managing his schedule, and if she told herself that enough times, it might feel less pathetic. Her desk phone rang. Paul George's office, this is Veronica. Veronica, darling, it's Diane. She smiled despite herself. Diane George, Paul's mother, was a force of nature wrapped in Chanel suits and genuine warmth. 72 years old, sharp as a tack, and one of the few people who actually saw Veronica as a person rather than a piece of office furniture. Hi, Mrs. George. He promised he'd call you back. Did he say when in this century? Diane's laugh was bright. That boy. I swear he'd forget his own head if it wasn't attached. How are you, sweetheart? I'm well, thank you. How are you feeling? I know you had that doctor's appointment last week. There was a pause. You remembered that? Of course. You mentioned it when you called about getting Paul to your book club fundraiser. Which he missed. Veronica acknowledged. But he did send a very generous donation. Money isn't the same as presents, but I suppose I'll take what I can get. Diane sighed. Infine, dear. Just the usual aches and pains of getting older. The doctor says my blood pressure is higher than he'd like, wants me to reduce stress. I told him he should talk to my son about calling his mother back. Veronica laughed. I'll make sure he calls today. I promise. You're a treasure. Paul doesn't know how lucky he is to have you. If only that were true in the way that made her heart skip. Just doing my job, Mrs. George. Nonsense. You go above and beyond, and everyone knows it. Listen, I'm having a small dinner party next month, July 13th. Just a few friends, very casual. I'd love for you to come. Veronica's fingers stilled on her keyboard. That's very kind, but before you say no, let me tell you that it's mostly book club ladies and their husbands. We'll have too much wine and too much food, and I could use an ally under the age of 60. Please? Consider it a personal favor to an old woman. You're not old. I'm 72, darling. That's old enough to shamelessly guilt people into doing what I want. So, July 13th? 7 o'clock at my place in Madison Park? Veronica found herself smiling. Okay. Yes. Thank you for inviting me. Wonderful. And Veronica? Don't let my son work you too hard. You're allowed to have a life outside that office. After they hung up, Veronica sat for a moment, staring at nothing in particular. July 13th. She opened her personal calendar and marked it down. Dinner at Mrs. George's. She'd need to find something appropriate to wear. Something nice but not too nice. Something that said competent professional but also casual dinner guest. Something that absolutely was not trying to impress Paul George, because that would be ridiculous. Her phone buzzed again. This time, her best friend Lainey. Lunch today? Need to vent about the new marketing director who thinks he invented branding. Veronica checked the time. She had 45 minutes before Paul's next meeting, and he was notorious for working through lunch anyway. Can you do 12:30? Meet at Pike Place? Perfect. I'll buy if you listen to me complain. Deal. At 12:15, Veronica knocked on Paul's door. He was exactly where she'd left him, phone pressed to his ear, laptop open, papers everywhere. I'm heading to lunch. You have the Henderson call at 2, but that's moved to Wednesday at 10. Is there anything you need before I go? He covered the phone's mouthpiece. I'm good. Thanks. She hesitated. Paul, call your mother. She's worried about you. Something softened in his expression. I will. Go. Enjoy your lunch. Pike Place Market was crowded with the usual mix of tourists and locals, the air filled with the smell of fresh fish and flowers and coffee. Veronica found Lainey at their usual spot, a small cafe tucked between a produce stand and a street musician playing surprisingly good jazz on a saxophone. Lainey Morgan was everything Veronica wasn't. Bold where Veronica was careful, loud where Veronica was measured, unapologetically herself in every situation. They'd been best friends since college, and Lainey had kept Veronica sane through more crises than she could count. Tell me you brought gossip, Lainey said by way of greeting, sliding a sandwich across the small table. I brought nothing but appreciation for you buying lunch. Boring. How's the billionaire? Multimillionaire. And he's fine. Busy. The usual. Lainey gave her a look. Girl. What? You still doing the tragic pining thing? I don't pine. I professionally assist. You've been professionally assisting yourself into being in love with a man who doesn't know you exist for 3 years now. Veronica took a bite of her sandwich to avoid responding immediately. When she finally swallowed, she kept her voice level. He knows I exist. I manage his entire life. Does he know your favorite color? That's not relevant to our professional relationship. Does he know where you grew up? What you studied in school? What you do on weekends? Lainey leaned forward. Veronica, I love you, but you've got to stop settling for invisible. You're brilliant, you're beautiful, and you deserve someone who sees you. I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've built your whole life around a man who thinks you're a very efficient piece of office equipment. The words stung because they were true. Veronica set down her sandwich. It's a good job, Lainey. It pays well. It's stable. And I don't have the luxury of quitting just because my boss doesn't notice my favorite color is burgundy. Lainey's expression softened. How's your mom doing? She's okay. Tired. Dad's medications are expensive, even with insurance. But we're managing. You're always managing. What about you? What about what you want? What did she want? The question sat heavy in her chest. She wanted her father's Parkinson's to stop progressing. She wanted her mother to stop pretending she wasn't exhausted. She wanted to stop feeling like she was running in place, working herself into the ground for a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. And yes, fine, she wanted Paul George to look at her just once the way he looked at the models and lawyers and entrepreneurs he dated. Just once, she wanted to be seen. But wanting didn't change anything. I want to finish this excellent sandwich and get back before Paul's meeting, she said lightly. Lainey sighed but let it drop. They talked about other things. Lainey's disaster of a dating life, the new Thai restaurant that opened on Capitol Hill, plans for the upcoming weekend. Normal things. Easy things. Veronica made it back to the office with 10 minutes to spare. Paul's door was still closed, his voice a low murmur through the glass. She settled at her desk and pulled up her email. At 1:55, she knocked softly. You're 2 o'clock. Except it's now your Wednesday 10 o'clock. But you have the Morris team arriving in 5 minutes. Paul looked up, and for the first time that day, really looked at her. His eyes were tired. Right. Morris. Got it. Coffee? Please. You're a lifesaver. She headed to the break room, ignoring the flutter in her chest that came from such a simple compliment. Lifesaver. If only he knew how many times she'd rearranged his schedule, smoothed over his forgotten callbacks, made sure his life ran like a well-oiled machine while he focused on building his empire. When she returned with the coffee, the Morris team was already in his office. She set the cup on his desk, and he gave her a brief nod of thanks, already deep in conversation about acquisition strategies and market positioning. Veronica closed the door and returned to her desk. Invisible again. And that was fine. It had to be fine. Because what other choice did she have? Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. 3 weeks passed in the usual rhythm of scheduled meetings and delivered coffee, and Veronica found herself standing in front of her closet on the evening of July 13, 2024, wondering what exactly one wore to dinner at the home of a woman who probably had more money in her jewelry box than Veronica earned in a year. She settled on a simple navy dress, classic and understated, with small gold earrings her mother had given her for her 30th birthday. Professional enough to feel safe, nice enough to be respectful. In the mirror, she looked exactly like what she was, competent, polished, and completely unremarkable. Perfect. Diane George's home in Madison Park sat back from the street, a beautiful craftsman-style house with a view of Lake Washington that probably cost more than Veronica would make in several lifetimes. The summer evening was warm, the sky still bright at 7 o'clock, and she could hear laughter floating from the back of the house as she approached the front door. She rang the bell, smoothing her dress one more time. Diane answered with a brilliant smile, elegant in cream linen pants and a silk blouse the color of sapphires. "Veronica. You came. Come in, come in." The interior was warmth and charm, all hardwood floors and built-in bookcases, art that looked original, and furniture that managed to be both expensive and inviting. Through the windows, Veronica could see a deck where several people stood with wine glasses, the lake glittering beyond them. "Everyone's out back," Diane said, linking her arm through Veronica's with easy affection. "Fair warning, they're all going to ask you 1,000 questions because I may have mentioned that you're the brilliant woman who keeps my son's life from falling apart. Mrs. George." "Diane, please. Mrs. George makes me feel ancient." She patted Veronica's arm. "And I mean it. Paul would be utterly lost without you." They stepped onto the deck, and immediately Veronica was enveloped by a group of women who all seemed to radiate the same kind of effortless grace as Diane. Introductions flowed: Margaret, who taught literature at University of Washington; Susan, a retired judge; Patricia, who owned an art gallery in Pioneer Square; and their husbands, whose names Veronica tried desperately to commit to memory. "Wine, dear." Diane pressed a glass into her hand. "It's a local Syrah. Absolutely divine." The evening unfolded with surprising ease. These weren't the stuffy socialites Veronica had feared. They were funny and sharp and genuinely interested in her answers when they asked about her work, her life, her thoughts on the books Diane kept recommending she read. "So you keep Paul George organized?" Margaret asked, her eyes twinkling. "That must be like herding a very intelligent, very stubborn cat." Veronica laughed. "That's actually a perfect description. Diane says he'd forget his own birthday without you." "He did forget his own birthday," Veronica admitted. 2 years ago. I had to remind him when the reservation confirmation came through for the dinner his girlfriend had planned." The women erupted in knowing laughter. "That sounds exactly like something Richard's son would do," Susan said. "These brilliant men, completely helpless with the basics of human life." "To be fair," Veronica said, "Paul remembers every detail of every business deal, every market trend, every client preference. His brain just has limited space for personal matters." "You're very kind to him," Diane observed, something thoughtful in her expression. "Even when he doesn't notice." Veronica felt heat creep up her neck. "It's my job. Diane's sound was non-committal, but her smile suggested she saw more than Veronica wanted to reveal. Dinner was served on the deck as the sun began its slow descent, turning the lake into molten gold. The food was incredible: grilled salmon that Diane insisted she'd prepared herself, roasted vegetables from the farmer's market, a salad with berries and candied walnuts. Conversation flowed from books to politics to travel, and Veronica found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did, contributing thoughts and laughing at stories. She was in the middle of describing her mother's disastrous attempt at making homemade pasta when Diane suddenly went very still. "Diane?" Patricia reached across the table. "Are you all right?" Diane's hand had gone to her chest, her face pale. "I'm fine. Just a little dizzy." But she wasn't fine. Veronica could see it in the way her breathing had gone shallow, the slight tremor in her fingers. Without thinking, she was on her feet, moving to Diane's side. "Can you describe what you're feeling?" she asked, her voice calm despite the spike of adrenaline. "Just pressure. And my arm feels strange. I'm sure it's nothing. Pressure in the chest. Arm discomfort. Dizziness." Veronica's mind raced through the CPR certification she'd renewed last year, the health articles she'd read while researching her father's conditions. "Has this happened before?" "Once or twice this week. The doctor said it was just stress." "Which arm feels strange?" "My left." Diane tried to smile. "Really, dear, I'm fine. Let's not make a fuss." But Veronica was already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling 911. "That's not necessary. Mrs. George, with respect, chest pressure and left arm discomfort isn't something we ignore." She was already dialing. "Even if it's nothing, we let the professionals make that call." The 911 operator answered, and Veronica rattled off the address, the symptoms, Diane's age, keeping her voice level and clear even as her heart hammered. Around them, the other guests had gone quiet, concern etched on every face. "They're sending an ambulance," Veronica said, setting down her phone. "Probably 10 minutes. Let's get you comfortable. Can someone bring some water?" Margaret disappeared inside while Veronica helped Diane into a more comfortable position on the deck chair, loosening the collar of her blouse slightly. Just breathe slowly. You're going to be fine. I feel ridiculous, Diane murmured, but her face was still too pale, a light sheen of perspiration on her forehead. You're being smart. Better ridiculous than sorry. Veronica kept her hand on Diane's wrist, monitoring her pulse. Elevated but steady. Is there someone we should call? Paul. Don't bother him. He's probably working. Diane, he'd want to know. After we know what it is. No point worrying him if it's nothing. Stubborn. Just like her son. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes, sirens cutting through the quiet neighborhood. 2 paramedics came through the house with practiced efficiency, and Veronica stepped back to let them work, answering their questions about timeline and symptoms while they checked Diane's vitals, asked her to rate her pain, attached monitoring equipment. We're going to take you to Swedish Medical Center, just to be safe, the older paramedic said. These symptoms warrant an EKG and some blood work. I'll ride with her, Veronica said. Are you family? I'm. Veronica hesitated. What was she? An employee of her son's? A dinner guest? I'm the person who's going to make sure she's not alone. The paramedic nodded. Let's go. In the ambulance, Diane reached for Veronica's hand. You don't have to do this. I know. Thank you. The hospital was bright and busy, even on a Saturday evening. They wheeled Diane back immediately, and Veronica found herself alone in the waiting room, finally pulling out her phone to call Paul. It rang 4 times before he answered. Veronica? Is everything okay? Just the sound of his voice, concerned and focused, made something in her chest tighten. I'm at Swedish Medical Center with your mother. She had chest pains and dizziness at dinner. The paramedics brought her in for evaluation. There was a beat of silence. Then, I'm on my way. 15 minutes. He made it in 12. Veronica saw him the moment he came through the emergency room doors, still in jeans and a faded University of Washington t-shirt, his hair uncombed, worry etched across his features in a way she'd never seen before. His eyes scanned the waiting room until they landed on her, and he crossed the space in long strides. Where is she? What happened? Veronica stood, suddenly very aware of how close he was, the intensity of his focus now directed entirely at her. They took her back about 20 minutes ago. She had chest pressure and discomfort in her left arm during dinner. I called 911. The paramedic said it warranted evaluation. Chest pressure. Left arm. He ran a hand through his hair. That's heart attack symptoms. Yes. But she's stable. Her vitals were good. This is precautionary. You were with her. I was at her dinner party. He blinked, seeming to really see her for the first time. The dress, the earrings, the fact that she was here at all. My mother invited you to dinner. She did. A few weeks ago. Something crossed his face, but before he could speak, a doctor emerged from the double doors. Family of Diane George? Paul moved immediately. I'm her son. How is she? She's stable. We ran an EKG and blood work. The good news is we're not seeing indicators of an active heart attack. However, her blood pressure is elevated, and there are some concerns we'd like to address. We're going to keep her overnight for observation and more tests in the morning. The tension in Paul's shoulders eased slightly. Can I see her? Of course. Follow me. Paul turned to Veronica. Come with me. It wasn't a request, and she found herself following him through the doors, down a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and floor cleaner, into a small room where Diane lay in a hospital bed, looking small and tired but alert. There you are, she said when she saw Paul. I told them not to worry you. Mum. He was at her side immediately, taking her hand. You had chest pains and didn't think I'd want to know? I didn't want to interrupt your Saturday. I was reading contract proposals. Trust me, this is more important. His voice was gentle despite the clear frustration. What did the doctor say? That I'm old and need to take better care of myself. That's not what I said, the doctor interjected with a patient smile. I said we need to monitor your blood pressure more carefully and run some additional cardiac tests. Mrs. George, you've been under stress, and with your family history, we want to be proactive. Diane sighed. My mother had a heart attack at 75. I'm 72. I suppose the universe is giving me a warning shot. Which you're going to take seriously, Paul said firmly. Yes, dear. Diane's eyes found Veronica, still standing near the doorway. This one saved my life, you know. Recognized the symptoms immediately, called for help, stayed calm. Everyone else was panicking, but Veronica knew exactly what to do. Paul turned, his gray eyes meeting Veronica's across the small room. Thank you. The words were simple, but the way he looked at her wasn't. It was like he was seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. Not as the assistant who managed his calendar or delivered his coffee, but as a person who had just potentially saved his mother's life. Anyone would have done the same, Veronica said quietly. But you're the one who did. Diane squeezed her son's hand. Paul, this girl is a treasure. I hope you know that. I'm beginning to, he said, still looking at Veronica in that new way that made her skin feel too warm. The doctor excused himself, and a nurse came in to adjust Diane's fore. Paul pulled a chair close to his mother's bedside, but his attention kept drifting back to where Veronica stood. You should go home, Diane said to her. You've done more than enough. I can stay if you need anything. Paul's here now. But thank you, sweetheart. Truly. Veronica nodded, suddenly feeling like an intruder on a private family moment. I'll check in tomorrow. Please rest. She was almost to the door when Paul spoke. Veronica. She turned. Can you wait? Just for a few minutes. I want to talk to you. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. Of course. She waited in the hallway, finding a chair near the nurse's station. Through the small window in Diane's door, she could see Paul sitting close to his mother, their heads bent together in conversation. The tenderness on his face, the gentle way he held her hand, it was a side of him she'd never seen in the office. Softer. More human. 20 minutes later, he emerged, closing the door quietly behind him. When he saw her still waiting, something in his expression shifted. Relief, maybe. Or surprise that she'd actually stayed. She's resting, he said, settling into the chair beside her. They gave her something to help her sleep. That's good. They sat in silence for a moment, the hospital humming around them with distant voices and beeping monitors. Paul leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. I don't know how to thank you, he said finally. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't recognized what was happening. But I was there. And she's going to be fine. Because of you. He turned his head to look at her. How did you know what to do? CPR certification. And my dad has Parkinson's, so I've spent a lot of time learning about medical symptoms and emergencies. Pattern recognition, I guess. Your father has Parkinson's. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. Diagnosed 6 years ago. He's managing okay, but it's been a learning curve for all of us. I didn't know that. Of course he didn't. Why would he? It's not something that comes up in quarterly report discussions. He had the grace to look chagrined. No. I suppose it wouldn't. He was quiet for another moment, then, my mother invited you to dinner. She did. A few weeks ago. She wanted an ally under 60, she said. That pulled a small smile from him. That sounds like her. She really likes you. I really like her too. She's wonderful. She is. His voice went soft. She's the most important person in my life. My dad died when I was 22. Cancer. She held everything together, kept me together, helped me build my first company when I had nothing but an idea and too much confidence. He looked down at his hands. The thought of losing her. You're not going to lose her. Not tonight. Not for a long time, if she listens to her doctors and takes care of herself. She's stubborn. Wonder where her son gets it from. He laughed, a real laugh that reached his eyes. Fair point. Then, you stayed. You rode in the ambulance, waited at the hospital, even though you barely know her. I know her well enough. She calls the office at least 3 times a week. We talk about books and life and how to trick you into taking a day off once in a while. You talk about me? Sometimes. She worries about you working too much. And what do you think? The question caught her off guard. What did she think? That he worked himself to exhaustion chasing something that seemed to always be just out of reach? That she'd watched him build empires while his personal life remained a revolving door? That he was brilliant and driven and sometimes so lonely it made her heart ache? I think you're very good at what you do, she said carefully. And I think your mother is proud of you, even when she wishes you'd call more. He studied her face, and Veronica felt exposed under that gray gaze. You're not what I expected. What do you mean? I don't know. I've worked with you for 3 years, and I'm realizing I don't know anything about you. Your father's illness. The fact that my mother invited you to dinner parties. That you're the kind of person who stays at a hospital with someone you barely know. He shook his head. I've been blind. You've been busy. That's not an excuse. A nurse walked past, and they both went quiet until she disappeared around a corner. The moment stretched, filled with things unsaid. Thank you, Paul said again. For tonight. For being there. For caring enough to act. You're welcome. Can I drive you home? It's the least I can do. Veronica thought about her car, still parked at Diane's house. Thought about the late hour and the long Uber ride back to Madison Park. Thought about sitting in the close confines of Paul George's car and what that might do to her carefully constructed professional distance. That would be nice, she heard herself say. Thank you. They walked to the parking garage in comfortable silence. His car was exactly what she'd expected, a sleek Mercedes, immaculate and expensive. He opened the passenger door for her, and she slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The Seattle streets were quiet at this hour, the city lights reflecting off Elliott Bay as they drove north. Paul handled the car with the same confident precision he brought to everything else, and Veronica found herself watching his hands on the steering wheel, the strong line of his jaw, the way the streetlights played across his features. "Where am I going?" he asked. She gave him her address in Capitol Hill, and he nodded, adjusting their route. Classical music played softly from the speakers, something she recognized but couldn't name. "Veronica," he said as they crossed the University Bridge. "Would you have dinner with me? Tomorrow night, maybe. Or whenever works for you. I'd like to actually talk to you. Get to know the person who's been keeping my life running for 3 years." Her heart stopped. Then started again, too fast. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I want to. Paul. Just dinner. As a thank you. And maybe as an apology for being the kind of boss who doesn't even know his assistant's favorite color." "It's burgundy," she said quietly. He glanced at her, surprised. "What? My favorite color? It's burgundy." A slow smile spread across his face, and Veronica felt something shift in the air between them. Something new and fragile and terrifying. "Burgundy," he repeated. "I'll remember that." Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. Veronica stood in front of her bathroom mirror on Sunday evening, July 21, 2024, trying to convince herself that this was just dinner. Just a simple thank you meal with her boss. Nothing more. Except her hands were shaking as she applied mascara, and she'd changed outfits 4 times, and Lainey was sprawled across her bed providing completely unhelpful commentary. "The green dress," Lainey said. "Definitely the green dress. It's too much. We're going to a restaurant, not the opera. Girl, he's taking you to the Walrus and the Carpenter. Do you know how hard it is to get a reservation there? This man made calls." Veronica set down the mascara and turned to face her friend. "This isn't a date. He's thanking me for helping his mother. Keep telling yourself that. I'm serious. Paul doesn't see me that way. Paul didn't see you at all until a week ago. Now he's taking you to one of the most romantic restaurants in Seattle on a Sunday night." Lainey sat up, her expression softening. I know you're scared. But maybe, just maybe, let yourself believe this could be something." "Could it be?" Veronica turned back to the mirror, studying her reflection. The green dress did look good, bringing out the warmth in her skin tone, fitting her curves in a way that was flattering without being obvious. Her natural hair was twisted up in a style that had taken her an hour to perfect, and small diamond studs, a gift from her parents when she'd graduated college, caught the light. She looked like someone going on a date. Which this wasn't. Her phone buzzed. "I'm outside whenever you're ready. Norus." Veronica's stomach flipped. "He's here. Go." Lainey practically pushed her toward the door. "And text me everything later." "Everything." Paul stood beside his car, and Veronica's breath caught. He'd traded his usual suit for dark jeans and a charcoal button-down, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hair was styled but still had that slightly messy quality that made him look approachable. Human. He looked up as she approached, and something crossed his face that she couldn't quite read. "Hi," she said, suddenly feeling awkward. He smiled, opening the passenger door. "You look beautiful." Heat crept up her neck. "Thank you. You didn't have to dress up." "Neither did you, but I'm glad you did." He waited until she was settled before closing the door, and Veronica caught Lainey watching from the apartment window, giving an enthusiastic thumbs up. The drive to Ballard took 20 minutes, filled with easy conversation about Diane's progress. She'd been released from the hospital that morning with strict instructions about diet, exercise, and stress management, along with new medication and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the end of the month. "She's already complaining about the restrictions," Paul said, a smile in his voice. "No salt, limited caffeine, daily walks. She told me the doctor was trying to make her life boring. She'll adjust. She's strong. She asked about you 3 times today. Wanted to make sure I was properly thanking you. And is this proper thanking?" He glanced at her, something playful in his expression. "I'm hoping it's adequate. Though I suspect nothing would actually be sufficient." The Walrus and the Carpenter was intimate and bustling, all exposed brick and warm lighting, the smell of fresh seafood and melted butter filling the air. They were seated at a small table near the window, close enough that their knees almost touched underneath. Paul ordered a bottle of white wine, and when the server left, he leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made Veronica's pulse quicken. "What?" she asked. I'm trying to figure out how I worked with you for 3 years and never noticed how expressive your eyes are. She didn't know what to do with that, so she took a sip of water instead. You were focused on other things. That's a diplomatic way of saying I was oblivious. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He smiled. Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with work. That's a broad question. Start anywhere. The server returned with wine, and they ordered oysters to start, grilled salmon for her, halibut for him. When they were alone again, Veronica found Paul still waiting, patient and genuinely interested. I wanted to be a teacher, she said finally. When I was in college, I was studying education. Elementary school, specifically. I loved the idea of shaping young minds, being the kind of teacher who made a difference. What changed? My dad got sick in my senior year. The medical bills started piling up, and teaching salaries in Seattle aren't exactly generous. I needed something that paid better, faster. So I switched my focus to business administration, took a job as a receptionist at Pemberton, and worked my way up. She traced the rim of her wine glass. It wasn't the plan, but it's been okay. Do you miss it? Teaching? No one had asked her that in years. Sometimes. I volunteer at a literacy program in Rainier Valley on Saturday mornings when I can. Help adults who are learning to read. It's not the same, but it's something. You volunteer. He said it like he was adding it to a growing list of things he hadn't known. Every Saturday? Most Saturdays. Unless you have me working weekend events. He winced. Which happens more than it should. It's fine. It's part of the job. What else don't I know about you? The oysters arrived, fresh and briny, and Veronica bought herself time by trying one. The taste was perfect, cold and clean with a hint of lemon. I have a ridiculous number of houseplants, she admitted. 23 at last count. My apartment looks like a jungle. And I bake when I'm stressed. Bread, mostly. There's something therapeutic about kneading dough. Paul's smile was warm. What else? I'm terrible at parallel parking. I love thunderstorms. I've read the entire Harry Potter series at least 8 times. I can't sing to save my life, but I do it anyway when I'm alone in the car. She paused. Your turn. Tell me something I don't know about you. He considered this, taking a sip of wine. I'm afraid of being like my father. The admission was quiet, almost lost in the restaurant noise. Veronica set down her fork. What do you mean? My dad was brilliant. Built a successful company, provided well for us, everyone respected him. Paul's eyes were distant. But he worked himself to death. Literally. Stress-induced heart attack at 58. He missed most of my childhood because he was always at the office, always chasing the next deal. When he got sick, he had all this money and success, but he'd missed everything that actually mattered. He met her gaze. I swore I wouldn't be like that. And yet here I am, 36 years old, working 80-hour weeks, missing my mother's calls, forgetting what day it is half the time. You're not him, Veronica said softly. How do you know? Because you're here. Because when your mother needed you, you showed up in 12 minutes. Because you're capable of recognizing the pattern and wanting to change it. She leaned forward slightly. Your father may not have had that self-awareness. Maybe. He was quiet for a moment, then, I haven't told anyone that. About being afraid of becoming him. Why tell me? Because I'm starting to think you see me more clearly than most people. You've been watching me for 3 years, managing the chaos of my life. If anyone knows who I really am, it might be you. The weight of that statement settled between them. The server cleared their plates and brought the main courses, but Veronica barely noticed. She was too focused on the way Paul was looking at her, like she was a puzzle he was finally trying to solve. Can I ask you something? He said as they started on the salmon. Why did you stay? At the hospital. You could have left once the paramedics arrived, or once I got there. But you stayed. Veronica thought about lying, about giving some professional answer about duty and responsibility. But the wine and the intimacy of the small table and the way he was really listening made her want to be honest. Because she was scared, and I didn't want her to be alone. And because I know what it's like to sit in hospital waiting rooms wondering if someone you love is going to be okay. She met his eyes. When my dad was first diagnosed, we spent weeks going to different specialists, sitting in sterile rooms waiting for test results. It's terrifying. I wouldn't wish that loneliness on anyone. You're remarkable, Paul said quietly. I'm really not. I just try to treat people the way I'd want to be treated. That's exactly what makes you remarkable. Most people say that. You actually live it. They talked through the rest of dinner, conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. He told her about selling his first company at 28, the terror and exhilaration of suddenly having more money than he knew what to do with. She told him about her parents, how they'd been married for 40 years and still held hands at the dinner table, how her mother had worked 3 jobs to put her through college. They sound wonderful, Paul said. They are. You'd like them. My mom would probably try to feed you the second you walked in the door, and my dad would want to talk to you about the stock market for hours. I'd love to meet them. The words hung in the air, weighted with implication. Veronica's heart stuttered. Paul, I know this started as a thank you dinner, he said, leaning forward. But I'm really glad I asked you. This has been the best evening I've had in longer than I can remember. Me too, she admitted. Can we do it again? Not as boss and assistant. Just as 2 people who enjoy each other's company. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. He was her boss. Getting involved would be complicated at best, catastrophic at worst. She could lose her job, lose the income her family depended on, lose the stability she'd worked so hard to build. But the way he was looking at her, the warmth in his eyes, the genuine interest and care, it made her want to be brave. I'd like that, she said. His smile could have lit the entire restaurant. They shared a dessert, some elaborate chocolate creation that was almost too pretty to eat, and lingered over coffee even after the server had brought the check. The restaurant began to empty around them, but neither seemed ready for the evening to end. I should probably get you home, Paul said finally, though he didn't move to stand. Probably. He paid the check despite her protests, and they walked to the car through Ballard's quiet streets. The summer night was warm, the air smelling of saltwater and night-blooming jasmine from someone's garden. In the car, he didn't start the engine right away. Instead, he turned to face her, his expression serious. Veronica, I need you to know that I meant what I said. About this not being a boss and assistant thing. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, I want it to be real. Which means at work, nothing changes. We stay professional. But outside of work. He reached across the console, his fingers brushing hers. Outside of work, I'd really like to get to know you. The real you. Not the polished professional version who manages my calendar. Her breath caught at the contact, his hand warm against hers. What if it gets complicated? It probably will. But I think you might be worth complicated. I could lose my job. You won't. And if it ever came to that, if anyone ever suggested there was a conflict of interest, I'd make sure you landed somewhere better. He squeezed her hand gently. But I don't think it will come to that. We're both adults. We can handle this maturely. Could they? Veronica wanted to believe it. Wanted to believe that she could separate her professional life from whatever was starting to bloom between them. Wanted to believe that this wouldn't end in heartbreak. Okay, she said softly. Let's try. He drove her home through streets that had grown quiet, his hand finding hers across the console, fingers intertwined in a way that felt both natural and thrilling. They talked about small things, upcoming work projects, a documentary he'd watched, her favorite hiking trails. When they pulled up outside her apartment, Paul walked her to the door, a gesture that felt sweetly old-fashioned. Thank you for tonight, Veronica said, fishing for her keys. I had a really wonderful time. So did I. He hesitated, and she could see him weighing something. Can I see you again this week? Maybe Wednesday? There's a jazz concert at Benaroya Hall. You like jazz? I have no idea. But I'd like to find out, and I'd like to find out with you. She laughed, warm and genuine. Wednesday works. It's a date. He said it deliberately, making sure she understood. This wasn't just dinner between colleagues. This was something more. It's a date, she echoed. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, he pressed a soft kiss to her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. Good night, Veronica. Good night, Paul. She watched him walk back to his car, waited until he'd driven away before she let herself float up the stairs to her apartment. Inside, she found Lainey had let herself in and was waiting on the couch with 2 glasses of wine and an expectant expression. Tell me everything, Lainey demanded. Veronica sank onto the couch, a smile she couldn't suppress spreading across her face. He kissed my cheek. And we're going to a jazz concert on Wednesday. And I think I'm in trouble, Lainey. The good kind of trouble, but trouble all the same. Lainey pulled her into a hug. Finally. It's about time you let yourself have something good. Later, lying in bed, Veronica replayed every moment of the evening. The way Paul had really listened, the gentle pressure of his hand in hers, the look in his eyes when he'd called it a date. It felt like standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful all at once. Her phone buzzed with a text. Thank you again for tonight. Sleep well. She typed back, you too. See you tomorrow? Tomorrow. Monday morning. Back to the office where they'd have to pretend this evening hadn't happened, where she'd deliver his coffee and manage his schedule and maintain perfect professionalism while knowing how his hand felt in hers. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt like a secret worth keeping. Like the beginning of something that might just change everything. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. The next 6 weeks unfolded like a double life, and Veronica found herself living in two completely different worlds that somehow existed in the same space. At work, nothing changed. She arrived at the Pemberton Financial Tower every morning at 8:30, delivered Paul's coffee at 9, managed his calendar with the same efficient precision she always had. In meetings, she took notes. On conference calls, she screened appropriately. When he asked for the quarterly reports or reminded him about the Henderson account, her voice remained perfectly professional. But on Tuesday evenings, they met at a small Italian restaurant in Fremont where nobody from the office would see them. On Thursdays, they walked through the Olympic Sculpture Park as the sun set over Puget Sound. On Saturdays, he started joining her at the literacy program in Rainier Valley, reading with students who lit up at his patient encouragement. It was August 24, 2024, and Veronica was simultaneously the most content and most anxious she'd been in years. "You're glowing," her mother said over Sunday dinner at her parents' house in Beacon Hill. "What's his name?" Veronica nearly choked on her rice. Her father laughed from his seat at the head of the table, his hand steady today. "A good day." "Subtle, Karen. I'm just saying, our daughter has that look." "I know that look." Her mother reached across to pat Veronica's hand. "I had that look when I met your father." "There's no look, Ma." "There's definitely a look," her father agreed, his eyes twinkling. "You going to tell us about him, or do we have to guess?" Veronica set down her fork, weighing how much to share. She'd kept Paul separate from this part of her life, not out of shame but out of protection. This thing between them was still so new, so fragile. And complicated by the fact that he was her boss, that their relationship could be seen as inappropriate, that she had no idea where it was actually going. "His name is Paul," she said finally. "He's kind and thoughtful and he makes me laugh. We've been seeing each other for about 6 weeks. 6 weeks and you're just telling us now?" Her mother's eyebrows rose. "I wanted to be sure it was real before I said anything." "And is it real?" her father asked gently. Veronica thought about the way Paul had shown up at her apartment last Tuesday with soup when she'd mentioned having a cold. The way he'd memorized her coffee order and her favorite flowers and the fact that she hated mushrooms. The way he listened when she talked about her students at the literacy program, asking follow-up questions the next week, genuinely interested in their progress. "I think it might be," she admitted. Her mother squeezed her hand. "Then we're happy for you, baby. When do we get to meet him?" "Soon. Maybe. It's complicated." "Love usually is," her father said. "Just make sure he treats you right. Make sure he sees how special you are." "He does, Dad. I promise." "But did he?" The question nagged at her as she drove home that evening. Paul was attentive and caring when they were alone together. But at work, he was still her boss. Still the man who sometimes forgot to say thank you, who expected her availability at all hours, who didn't seem to notice when she stayed late 3 nights in a row to finish the presentation he'd requested at the last minute. She was pulling into her apartment parking lot when her phone rang. "Paul." "Hey," she answered. "Are you home?" "Just got here." "Why? Can I come over?" "I know it's Sunday and we said we'd keep weekends flexible, but I wanted to see you." Her heart did that ridiculous fluttering thing it had been doing for 6 weeks now. "Of course. I'll be here." He arrived 20 minutes later with a bottle of wine and a nervous energy she didn't recognize. In her apartment, surrounded by the jungle of plants and the worn but comfortable furniture, he seemed different. Less polished. More real. "Everything okay?" she asked, pouring wine into the mismatched glasses that were all she owned. "My mother wants to have dinner. With both of us. Together." He took the glass she offered. She called it a family dinner, but she was very specific that you should be there. Veronica's stomach dropped. "Paul, that's... I know. I know it's soon and I know it's complicated and I know we haven't talked about what this is or where it's going." He set down his glass and took her hands. "But my mother loves you. She's been asking about you constantly since the hospital. And honestly, I'd really like you to be there. Not as my assistant. As the woman I've been seeing. As someone who matters to me." "What would we tell her? About us?" "The truth. That we've been spending time together. That I care about you. That I'd like to see where this goes." His thumbs traced circles on the backs of her hands. "Unless that's not what you want." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because you're my boss, Paul. Because at work tomorrow, I'll be the person who brings you coffee and schedules your meetings. Because if anyone found out about us, they'd assume I was sleeping my way to job security. Because I could lose everything I've worked for." You won't. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that. He was quiet for a moment, then pulled her down to sit beside him on the couch. You're right. I can't promise that the situation isn't complicated. But I can promise that I'm serious about this. About you. And I can promise that if it ever came down to choosing between my job and you, I'd choose you. The words hung in the air, enormous and terrifying. Don't say things like that. Why not, if they're true? Because we've only been doing this for 6 weeks. Because that's not a decision you should have to make. Because, her voice cracked. Because I'm scared, Paul. I'm scared that this is going to fall apart and I'm going to lose my job and disappoint my parents and end up right back where I started. He pulled her close, and she let herself sink into his embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. I'm scared too, he admitted quietly. I'm scared that I'm going to mess this up the way I've messed up every other relationship. I'm scared that I'll get too focused on work and you'll realize you deserve better. I'm scared that I've finally found someone who sees me, really sees me, and I'm going to lose you because I don't know how to balance everything. She pulled back to look at him. You're doing fine. Better than fine. Am I? Because I still expect you to work late without asking if you have plans. I still forget that you have a life outside of managing mine. Last week I called you at 9 p.m. about the Morrison file and didn't even think about whether you might be busy. I wasn't busy. That's not the point. The point is I didn't think to ask. I'm still treating you like my assistant even when we're not at work, and that's not fair to you. Veronica traced the collar of his shirt, gathering her thoughts. We need boundaries. Clear ones. At work, you're my boss and I'm your assistant. We're professional. We don't blur those lines. But outside of work, we're equals. You don't call me about work stuff after 6 unless it's an actual emergency. And I don't let you take me for granted. Deal. He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. And the dinner with my mother? When? Next Sunday. September 1st. Just the 3 of us at her place. Next Sunday. 6 days away. 6 days to prepare herself to sit across from Diane George and pretend this was normal, that she wasn't terrified, that she had any idea what she was doing. Okay, she said. I'll be there. His smile was brilliant, and he kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Thank you. For taking a chance on this. On me. Thank you for seeing me, she whispered back. They spent the rest of the evening on her couch, watching a movie neither of them paid attention to, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his first failed business venture, a tech startup that had crashed and burned spectacularly when he was 25. She told him about the time she'd accidentally sent a company-wide email meant only for him, complete with a reminder to, please remember to eat lunch because you get grumpy when your blood sugar drops. I remember that, he said, laughing. The entire office teased me for weeks. I was mortified. I thought it was sweet. Someone actually cared whether I ate lunch. I always cared. You just never noticed. He sobered at that, pulling her closer. I notice now. I notice everything about you. The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. The way you always organize things by color. The way you hum while you work, usually something from whatever musical you watched most recently. You know I watch musicals? I pay attention now, he said simply. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Veronica stood in the elevator heading to the 42nd floor, coffee in hand, mentally preparing herself to step back into her professional role. When the doors opened, she took a breath and walked to Paul's office with the same efficient stride she always had. He was already at his desk, on the phone. She set the coffee down, mouthed, "Good morning," and turned to leave. "Veronica, wait." He covered the phone's mouthpiece. "Thank you. For the coffee. And for last night." She smiled, small and private. "You're welcome. Your 10 o'clock with Peterson is in conference room B. Noted. Professional. Appropriate. Exactly as they'd agreed. But when she returned to her desk, there was a post-it note on her keyboard in his handwriting. Lunch? 12:30? My treat. She typed a response into their work chat. Can't. Lunch meeting with Janet from accounting. Tomorrow? It's a date. She deleted the message thread, maintaining their careful separation. This could work. They could do this. The week progressed in the same careful dance. At work, they were boss and assistant. After hours, they were something else entirely. On Wednesday, he took her to a bookstore in University District and bought her 3 novels she'd mentioned wanting to read. On Friday, she brought him homemade bread, warm from her oven, and watched his face light up at the first bite. Sunday arrived faster than Veronica was ready for. She changed outfits 5 times before settling on a simple dress in deep burgundy, remembering that Paul had remembered her favorite color. She wore her hair natural, curls framing her face, and kept her makeup subtle. Paul picked her up at 6:30, and she didn't miss the way his eyes widened when he saw her. "You're stunning. You clean up pretty well yourself." In the car, he reached for her hand. "Fair warning, my mother is probably going to ask about our intentions and whether we're being smart about this whole situation." "Are we being smart about this?" "Probably not. But I've never been good at smart when it comes to things that matter." Diane's house looked the same as it had 7 weeks ago, but everything felt different now. When Diane opened the door, her smile was knowing and warm. "There you are. Both of you. Together." She pulled Veronica into a hug. "I'm so glad you're here, sweetheart. Thank you for having me. Always." Diane turned to her son. "And you. Looking happy for once. It's a nice change." Dinner was relaxed and lovely. Diane had cooked herself salmon again, with roasted vegetables and a salad, and the conversation flowed easily. They talked about books and current events and Diane's recent doctor's appointment, which had gone well. Her blood pressure was down, her tests all clear. "The doctor says whatever I'm doing, I should keep doing it," Diane said. "I told him I'd survived a health scare and my son had finally found a wonderful woman. Both seemed to be good for my stress levels." Veronica felt heat creep up her neck, but Paul just laughed. "Subtle, Mom. I'm 72. I've earned the right to be unsubtle." Diane turned to Veronica. "So tell me, dear, how long has this been going on?" "About 6 weeks," Veronica admitted. "And you're happy? Both of you?" "Very," Paul said, his hand finding Veronica's under the table. "Good. That's what matters." Diane's expression turned more serious. "But I hope you're both being careful. Office romances can be complicated." "We're aware," Veronica said. "We're keeping things professional at work." "And you're sure this is what you want? Both of you?" Diane looked between them. "Because I love you both, and I don't want to see either of you hurt." "I'm sure," Paul said firmly. Veronica met Diane's eyes. "So am I." After dinner, they sat on the deck overlooking the lake, the September evening warm and clear. Diane had gone inside to make coffee, leaving them alone for a moment. "That went well," Paul said, pulling Veronica close on the porch swing. "Your mother is wonderful. She loves you. She told me last week that you were the best thing to happen to me in years." "She said that?" "She did. And she's right." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the fading light. "Veronica, I know it's only been 6 weeks. I know we're still figuring this out. But I need you to know that this is real for me. You're real for me. And I'm in this for as long as you'll have me." Her heart felt too big for her chest. "I'm in this too. Scared, but in this. We'll figure it out together," he promised. Diane returned with coffee and dessert, and they stayed until the stars came out, talking and laughing and simply being together. When Paul finally drove Veronica home, she felt something settle in her chest. Something that felt like hope. "Come up," she asked when they reached her apartment. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." In her apartment, surrounded by plants and soft lamplight, he kissed her properly for the first time. Not the gentle pecks they'd shared before, but something deeper, more certain. When they broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you," he whispered. "In case that wasn't obvious." "It's becoming obvious," she whispered back. "And for the record, I'm falling too." They spent the rest of the evening on her couch, talking until midnight about dreams and fears and the future they were starting to believe they might build together. And when he finally left, pressing one more kiss to her lips at the door, Veronica knew that whatever complications lay ahead, this was worth it. He was worth it. They were worth it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. October arrived in Seattle with crisp mornings and leaves turning gold along the streets, and Veronica found herself standing at a crossroads she'd never anticipated. It was October 15th, 2024, 4 months since that dinner party that had changed everything, and she was sitting in a coffee shop on Capitol Hill across from someone she'd never expected to see again. "Thank you for meeting me," said Margaret Chen, former Senior VP of Human Resources at Pemberton Financial. She'd left the company 3 months ago to start her own consulting firm. "I know this must seem strange." "A little," Veronica admitted, wrapping her hands around her latte. "Your email was pretty mysterious." Margaret smiled. "I'll get right to it. I'm building my team, and I need an operations director. Someone organized, diplomatic, someone who can manage complex situations and keep everything running smoothly. Your name was the first one that came to mind." Veronica's heart skipped. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity. Operations director, full benefits, salary that's 40% higher than what you're making now. And complete autonomy to build the systems however you see fit." Margaret slid a folder across the table. The details are all in there. But Veronica, I've watched you manage chaos for years. You're brilliant at what you do, and you're wasted as an executive assistant. The folder sat between them, heavy with possibility. Veronica didn't open it. Why now? Because I can finally afford you. And because I think you're ready for something more. Margaret's expression softened. I also heard a rumor. About you and Paul George. Veronica's stomach dropped. I don't know what you heard, but... Relax. I'm not here to judge or report anything. I don't work at Pemberton anymore, remember? Margaret leaned forward. But if the rumor is true, this offer might solve a problem for you. No more conflict of interest. No more worrying about office politics or what people might say. Did Paul send you? God, no. He'd probably be furious if he knew I was poaching you. Margaret smiled. This is purely selfish on my part. I want the best, and you're the best. What you do with your personal life is your business. Veronica walked back to her apartment in a daze, the folder tucked under her arm. Inside, she finally opened it. The salary figure made her breath catch. With that kind of money, her parents wouldn't have to worry about medical bills. She could pay off her student loans. She could save, travel, breathe. And she wouldn't be Paul's assistant anymore. The thought created a strange ache in her chest. Being Paul's assistant was how this had all started. It was their story, their foundation. Would they still work without that daily interaction, those moments of coffee delivery and schedule coordination that had let her fall in love with him in the first place? Her phone buzzed. Paul, dinner tonight? I'm cooking. She smiled despite her confusion. You're cooking? Should I bring a fire extinguisher? Very funny. My place at 7? I'll be there. Paul's apartment in Belltown was sleek and modern, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture. She'd been here a handful of times now, but it still felt like stepping into a different world. He greeted her at the door in jeans and a t-shirt, an apron tied around his waist that said, "Kiss the cook," in faded letters. Did your mother give you that apron? Birthday gift 3 years ago. First time I've actually used it. He pulled her inside, kissing her softly. How was your day? She almost told him about Margaret's offer. Almost. But something made her hesitate. It was good. Productive. How was yours? Long. But better now. He led her to the kitchen where something was actually cooking that smelled amazing. Chicken piccata. I followed a YouTube tutorial. We'll see if it's edible. They cooked together, Veronica chopping vegetables while Paul managed the chicken with careful concentration. It was domestic and easy, and she felt that same warmth she always felt around him now. Like coming home. Over dinner, which was surprisingly delicious, Paul seemed distracted, almost nervous. Everything okay? Veronica asked. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. He set down his fork. I've been thinking a lot about us. About this situation we're in. Her stomach tightened. Okay. I hate that we have to hide at work. I hate that you worry about what people might think, that there's this constant stress about conflict of interest. He reached across the table for her hand. So I talked to the partners at Pemberton. Disclosed our relationship officially. Veronica's heart stopped. You what? I told them we've been seeing each other, that it's serious, and that I wanted to make sure everything was above board. They were actually really supportive. Said as long as we maintain professional boundaries at work and I'm not involved in decisions about your compensation or promotion, there's no issue. Paul, you should have talked to me first. I know. And I'm sorry for not consulting you. But I couldn't stand the secrecy anymore. I want to be able to take you to company events. I want people to know that you're important to me. That this is real. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt the weight of the folder in her bag, the decision she now had to make feeling even more complicated. There's something I need to tell you, she said quietly. His expression shifted to concern. What is it? Margaret Chan offered me a job. Operations director at her consulting firm. Significant pay increase, more responsibility, complete autonomy. Paul went very still. When did this happen? This morning. She asked me to meet for coffee. And you're considering it. It wasn't a question. Veronica squeezed his hand. It's a good opportunity, Paul. The kind of opportunity one might not get again. And it would solve the work problem. No more conflict of interest, no more worrying about boundaries. But we wouldn't see each other every day. His voice was careful, controlled. No. We wouldn't. He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. You should take it. What? You should take the job, Veronica. It's what you deserve. You're brilliant and capable and you should be doing more than managing my calendar and bringing me coffee. He met her eyes. Even if it means I don't get to see you at work anymore, you should take it. Tears pricked at her eyes. Just like that? You're okay with it? I'm not okay with seeing you less. But I'm less okay with being the reason you don't reach your full potential. He stood, pulling her up with him, wrapping his arms around her. I love you, Veronica. And when you love someone, you support their dreams even when it's hard. She pulled back to look at him. What did you just say? I said you should take the job. Before that. Realization crossed his face, followed by a smile. I love you. I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but the timing never felt right. And maybe this isn't the right time either, but it's true. I love you. I love you too, she whispered, and kissed him, tasting tears she hadn't realized were falling. They held each other in his kitchen, the dinner forgotten, the future uncertain but somehow less frightening now that they'd said the words. I haven't decided yet, Veronica said eventually. About the job. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. Whatever you decide, we'll make it work. Promise? Promise. She took the weekend to think. Talked to her parents, who were thrilled at the salary increase but concerned about her leaving a stable position. Talked to Lainey, who pointed out that this was exactly the kind of opportunity Veronica had been working toward for years. Talked to Diane, who said simply, follow your heart, dear. Both in love and in work. On Monday morning, October 21st, Veronica walked into Pemberton Financial with her decision made. She delivered Paul's coffee as usual, managed his morning meetings, handled the constant stream of emails and calls. At lunch, she walked to Margaret's office downtown and accepted the position. Her start date would be November 4th, giving her 2 weeks to train her replacement at Pemberton. That evening, she told Paul over dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant in Fremont. I'm proud of you, he said, raising his wine glass. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, she echoed. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of training sessions and handover meetings. Paul remained supportive, even helping her pick out furniture for her new office. At work, they maintained their professional boundaries, but everyone seemed to know anyway. Janet from accounting hugged her on her last day, whispering, I'm so happy for you both. Her final day at Pemberton was November 3, 2024. She'd been there for 8 years, had built a career and a reputation and had found love in the last place she'd expected. As she packed up her desk, Paul appeared in the doorway. Got a minute? For you? Always. He closed the door behind him, suddenly looking nervous in a way she rarely saw. I know today is about you and this amazing new opportunity. But I wanted to give you something before you officially stop being my employee. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Veronica's heart started racing. Paul, before you panic, it's not what you think. Not yet, anyway. He opened the box to reveal a delicate necklace, a small key pendant in white gold. I wanted you to have this. A symbol of how you've been the key to everything good in my life these past few months. She let him fasten it around her neck, the metal cool against her skin. It's beautiful. So are you. He kissed her softly. I can't wait to see what you accomplish at the new job. And I can't wait to be the person who gets to celebrate every success with you. Even though we won't see each other every day? We'll make time. Breakfast dates before work. Lunch when we can. Every evening together if you'll have me. He cupped her face in his hands. Distance doesn't scare me, Veronica. Losing you does. And I don't plan on letting that happen. Starting at Margaret's firm was everything Veronica had hoped for and more. The work was challenging, the team was supportive, and for the first time in her professional life, she felt like she was building something of her own rather than supporting someone else's vision. But she missed seeing Paul every day. Missed the coffee deliveries and the shared looks across conference rooms and the way they developed their own shorthand over 3 years of working together. They adapted. Tuesday breakfast dates at Pike Place Market became sacred. Thursday dinners at whichever restaurant they were trying that week. Weekends spent hiking or visiting her parents or simply existing together in comfortable silence. And through it all, they grew. Not just as a couple, but as individuals. Paul started leaving work at reasonable hours, started taking Sundays completely off to spend with his mother or with Veronica. Veronica flourished in her new role, implementing systems and building relationships and proving Margaret's faith in her had been well placed. It was December 20th, 2024, 6 months since everything had changed, when Paul suggested a walk through the Olympic Sculpture Park despite the cold. They bundled up in coats and scarves, walking hand in hand along the waterfront as the winter sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Elliott Bay stretched out before them, and in the distance, the Olympic Mountain stood snow-capped against the horizon. I love this city, Veronica said, leaning into Paul's warmth. I love you in this city, he replied. Actually, I'd love you anywhere. But Seattle seems fitting for us. They stopped at their favorite bench, the one overlooking the water where they'd sat countless times over the past months. Paul turned to face her, and Veronica saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. "Veronica James," he said, taking both her hands. "6 months ago, I was blind to the most incredible woman who'd been in my life for years. I was so focused on work, on success, on building something that looked impressive from the outside that I completely missed what actually mattered." "Paul, let me finish. Please." He smiled, nervous and genuine. "You saved my mother's life. But more than that, you saved mine. You showed me what it means to be seen, to be cared for, to be loved for who I am rather than what I've accomplished. You made me want to be better. To do better." He dropped to one knee, and Veronica's hands flew to her mouth. "I know it's fast. I know we've only been together for 6 months, only known each other as more than boss and assistant for half a year. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He pulled out a ring box, opening it to reveal a beautiful solitaire diamond that caught the fading light. "Veronica, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face, joy and shock and overwhelming love all mixed together. "Yes. Yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled her into a kiss that felt like a promise, like a beginning, like everything she'd ever wanted and never dared to hope for. Around them, a few passers-by applauded. Veronica laughed against Paul's lips, happy and overwhelmed and so completely in love. "I can't believe you just proposed to me in a park in December. Would you have preferred a fancy restaurant? I can do it again. Don't you dare. This was perfect." She held up her hand, watching the diamond sparkle. "Though my mother is going to have about 1,000 questions. I already asked your father for his blessing. Called him last week." "You did?" "I did. He said I was a lucky man and he'd better treat you like a queen or he'd find a way to make me regret it, Parkinson's or no Parkinson's." Veronica laughed, imagining that conversation. "What did you say?" "I said I was the luckiest man alive and I planned to spend every day proving I deserved you." He kissed her again, soft and sweet. "And I meant it. Every word." They walked back to his car hand in hand, making plans and dreaming out loud about their future. A spring wedding, they decided. Something intimate with family and close friends. Maybe in her parents' backyard, or at Diane's house overlooking the lake. "Whatever you want," Paul said. "As long as I get to marry you, nothing else matters." That Christmas, they celebrated with both families. Diane cried happy tears and immediately started planning, while Veronica's parents welcomed Paul with the warmth and love she'd known they would. Her father pulled Paul aside at one point, and she watched them talk seriously for several minutes before her father clapped Paul on the shoulder and pulled him into a hug. "What did he say to you?" she asked later. "That he trusted me with his daughter's heart, and that was the greatest honor anyone had ever given him." Paul's eyes were suspiciously bright. "And that if I ever made you cry for the wrong reasons, he knew people." Veronica burst out laughing. "He does not know people." I believed him anyway. New Year's Eve found them at a small party at Diane's house, surrounded by friends and family. As midnight approached, Paul pulled Veronica onto the deck where they'd first really connected months ago. "This is where it started," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they watched the Seattle skyline prepare for celebration. "Right here, with you saving my mother and me finally opening my eyes. Best dinner party I ever attended. Best decision I ever made, asking you to stay." He turned her in his arms, his expression soft in the glow of the house lights. "Here's to the year we fell in love. And to all the years ahead." The countdown began inside. 10, 9, 8. "I love you," Veronica whispered. "I love you," Paul whispered back. 7, 6, 5. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. "Thank you for being worth seeing," he replied. 4, 3, 2, 1. Fireworks exploded over Elliott Bay as they kissed, welcoming 2025 and everything it would bring. A wedding in April at Diane's house, surrounded by spring flowers and the people they loved most. A honeymoon in Italy, wandering through vineyards and eating too much pasta. A life built on mutual respect and support and the kind of love that grew stronger with every passing day. But in that moment, on the deck where everything had changed, all that mattered was this: they had found each other. Against all odds, through blindness and revelation, from invisible to essential, they had found their way to love. And neither of them planned on letting go. Months later, on their wedding day, April 12, 2025, as Paul lifted Veronica's veil and looked at her with tears in his eyes, he whispered, "I see you. I'll always see you." And she whispered back, "I know. And I see you too." It was all the promise they needed. All the future they wanted. All the love they'd been searching for, found in the last place either expected, with the person who had been there all along. Sometimes love was loud and dramatic. But sometimes, it was quiet and steady. Sometimes it was built on coffee deliveries and hospital waiting rooms and the courage to take a chance on something that seemed impossible. Sometimes the person you were meant to love had been right in front of you all along. You just had to open your eyes and see. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next.